I guess we'll get this going again. Hope you guys are enjoying everything so far.
Yep.
Yeah? You do it again next year?
Woo!
Yeah? You bring friends with you next year? Bring more people to need a bigger room next year? Hopefully?
Hopefully.
All right. So next up is, excuse me? In Halloween costume.
No.
Yeah, there is a costume party tonight.
I'm in costume already.
Oh, okay.
I can
Taking a touchdown. So next up is a good friend of mine, Adrian Crenshaw. You guys should all know him, better known as the Iron Geek. IronGeek.com. Let's hear it for Adrian. Adrian. He needs a little bit more of that. Just the women. There's at least one. Come on. Make some noise. That was better than all the rest, right? All right, he's going to take a leak on the water for us, guys. Let's hear it for Adrian.
By the way, if anybody wants to, I might be doing a little bit of demo stuff later. I'm not sure. It depends on time. So if you see a network called Netcoff, go ahead and attach to it. I'm not doing anything too malicious. I'm just, you're right, identity stuff, that kind of thing. Not sure. All right, let me go ahead and get this thing up. I'm going to let you all soak in that title screen for just a second. I needed something, so I figured that was the most appropriate thing I could go with.
Did you do that in Visio?
A strange combination of Paint.net and mostly Paint.net actually, and then of course PowerPoint. But my presentation today is on taking a leak on the network. Little things that give an attacker's identity away. Alright, first of all, a little bit about me. That disturbs me.
Look good in a suit.
Well, thank you. I run IronGeek.com. I have an interest in InfoSec education. I don't know everything. I like to give extra time on my hands. Occasionally we'll get things wrong. And a large portion of this particular talk is kind of to be a call for more research. Hopefully get people interested in the subject, and we can start compiling lists of extra things. And some of it's actually a lot related to what Carlos was saying earlier. So we'll see how this goes. Also, I'm a regular on the ISD podcast, usually every Thursday. It's a 5-time-a-week podcast, so all your work days, if you want something to listen to in the morning, there you go. Alright. Basically, this talk is about what information is leaking out about you or someone else's box while they're connected to a network. Things that could lead to identity or a good idea of who it is that's connected to a network and tying events to people. We're talking about various things. Outright identification of someone. Also, we're talking about shrinking the anonymity set. And I hate the word anonymity mostly because I can't say it well. But shrinking the anonymity set is basically reducing the total number of usual suspects you'd actually have to look at to figure out who's actually doing something. For instance, narrowing it down to everybody has a Dell PC, or everyone who happens to be running Windows 7, Service Pack, whatever. So why this talk? Well, first of all, because Rob told me to come up with something. That's probably the chief reason. Rob invited me out here, and I was like, okay, I can come up with something. Second of all, I'm in a privacy class right now. I was going to do some class project, but my work with IGP kind of took precedence over that instead. And also, I just want to do a general call for research and hear other people's ideas in this subject matter. And a lot of it's also inspired by the Backtrack 4 slogan, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. The first time I ever heard of that was actually on the Backtrack website. I looked it up online. Apparently it's this guy named Baba Das was the one who came up with it, but I'm not a shiftless hempfeet that doesn't bathe, so I think of it as the Backtrack 4 slogan.
Except he's a Hindu, I think.
That sounds an awful like a hippie to me. It has an H in it.
There you go, stereotyping.
Alright, who might this talk interest? One, pen testers who are interested in not being caught or being stealthy. That goes back to a lot of stuff from Carlos' talk. Pro bono pen testers. This is my buddy Bob. Bob Swim. Someone who is not me. Bob occasionally does like pro bono pen tests at his local coffee shop or some other place he happens to encounter. And let's say he doesn't want to necessarily have anything left in the logs that traces back to him. So that's my pro bono PvP. Attackers, of course, would be interested. And anybody who's actually developing or just has to look at IDS logs or just general logs might be interested in the kind of things they should look for that could lead to the identifying of someone who's attacking those systems. And of course, incident response people and people who want to test incident response. Actually, I don't do pen testing professionally, but how often as a pen tester are you asked to, I want you to test our incident response team and how good they are at tracking down data based on attack and actually leave some stuff that they should be able to track down. Does anybody get asked to do a pen test like that? People like that I think might be interested in this talk, and people who want to look better at when they do their incident response might be interested. A lot of the tips I'm going to give throughout this entire talk can largely be solved by just building a clean room box. Essentially a box you do nothing else with but run the attack tools. It has no other personal data on it. Make a clean box if you can afford it, have your own separate laptop completely. You know, a separate boot partition might be the second best option. Push comes to shove, you can try making a VM, although you still have your normal host OS computer on that network, which is not an ideal solution. And most of these mitigation techniques I'm going to be talking about throughout this talk can be taken inside the clean room box. But I'm also going to be offering separate tips as well. Also, for legitimate pen testers, and I've seen Ed's Code make a big deal about this one, it keeps customer data separate. Because I've heard tales, I think it was Chris Nicholson on the podcast once, he was talking about doing a pen test where he actually was in scope, he was scanning all the machines on the network, and he happened to find another machine that was like running Metasploit or something, and he found out it was another pen tester's box, and all his customers' data on it. Now, that's one thing that's bad. But imagine if that pen tester actually had data from other companies as well as the company he was currently assigned on. That really does not look good to the company, now does it? Alright, just a few leaks of many that could be discussed. This is by no means a comprehensive list. MAC addresses left in log files. Browser tabs that automatically open. Network scans that automatically use the credentials of the logged-in user. Wi-Fi SID probes. Hostname / NetBIOS name broadcasts. And last DHCP lease renews. And various other apps, like, remember, not so much Skype, but definitely IRC and some IM clients. Alright, all these things can help lead to the identity of someone who's attacking the network if you happen to come across these in the logs. First of all, most of us probably know what a MAC address is. And the first six, here's me pulling up the ifconfig command in Linux, or the ipconfig command /all in Windows, and I've highlighted the MAC address in question. Now, in theory, every MAC address is unique. This ain't true. And, oh man, I hate when I'm asking on a forum system or some kind of like Hardwalk and I get someone with Best Buy broker's knowledge of networking and I say, well, your MAC address is unique, you can't change it. Bullshit. But more or less they're unique. At least the ones that are burnt on the card should be unique, barring certain manufacturer screw-ups. They can be spoofed fairly easily, but if you're an actual attacker, I suppose good luck proving that if they happen to find your MAC address on if they happen to come confiscate your machine and find out its MAC address matches something that's in the logs. The first 6 hex digits are the OUI, or Organizational Unit Identifier. There's actually a nice little web page out there you can look it up. So if you see the first 6 what's the first 6 hexadecimal characters that, you can find out who the original vendor of that particular network project was, assuming the person didn't spoof the MAC address, which I'll discuss here in a second. Also, I'm kind of wondering about this. I wonder how many vendors actually log this information. Like, let's say you're a company. I'm just on the screen. Let's say you're Tenacity Solutions. And you buy something, let's say you buy a laptop from Dell. I mean, we know they know that you're tracking information as far as your service tag and all that. I wonder if that data is actually logged when you buy a PC from Dell or some other company. And I wonder if the right people like subpoena them for information, if they would have that. I mean, it wouldn't be hard for them to do that, and I'm just curious. I never heard of them doing that. And also, Dr. Huna, you were talking about some kind of service that actually ties MAC addresses to where someone is in the world based on geolocation.
Google's got a geolocation code where you can go in and put a MAC address, and if it's using public Wi-Fi and a location is turned on, it will actually show you where it was.
I want to see that script. That's going to be really useful. Because especially from the standpoint of imagine if you're an attacker somewhere, or you want to find an attacker, you happen to find a MAC address log, you can use that service to go, oh, this is part of that likely person's home. That's, that'd be a bad thing. So if you find that script, mail it to me. Okay, mitigations against this particular data leak problem. You can change it if possible. There's a guide out there on my website, like a ton of different ways of changing MAC addresses on OS X, various versions of Windows, Linux, BSD, just a ton of different operating systems. You have to do it in Linux. It's really simple. ifconfig, name of the interface, down, hardware, ether, and whatever Ethernet address you want to set up, then bring it back up. And now you have a new MAC address. Super simple in Linux. Windows is a little more complicated. There's actually a bunch of reg hacks you have to make. And for some reason on some network cards, it just doesn't work. Like the wireless card in my current laptop, I can't do it to. I can't change it. I've seen other network cards where you can change it, but only if you keep the 6-digit OUI the same. And my Ethernet card, though, no problems. I can change that MAC address to anything I want on my machine. So it seems to be somewhat either driver or hardware dependent. But another tool of MadMax fails for you. There's also SMAC. MadMax is a tool I wrote, and that's kind of designed part of the idea around someone else's script, but it randomizes the MAC address, or can randomize the MAC address, and your host name every time you reboot the machine. Alright, a related subject matter is IP6. IP6, at least for the local link IP address, actually clones your MAC address into it, so to speak. For instance, if you notice, this is my local link address, this is my MAC address, and you see how this is formed out of my MAC address. And there's a certain digit up here that's actually flipped to keep things from coming out as 00 in different parts of the IP6 address. I need to do more research on this, because I've seen people talk about this as revealing your identity. But on the other hand, I've seen this local link address is only supposed to be used on the local area network. So if you're on the local area network, the MAC address is already pretty much given out there anyway, because it has to be for ARP to work properly. So if anybody has some more details on IP6 and how far, at which particular IP6 addresses of all the different IP6 addresses your machine has, which ones actually have your MAC address into the add your MAC address into the figuring of the address, let me know. That was a whole lot of saying the word address. Alright, next possible thing that can lead to identity. Imagine someone's at the local coffee shop and they're scanning the network, but they're also web surfing around and they open up a bunch of tabs. How much information, well, you already know what IP address is doing the scanning, if any kind of logging at all. And if you have some kind of a web analysis tool, what web pages people are going to, the same IP is visiting all these different sites, it might give you a rough idea of who they are. First of all, he's visiting irongeek.com, that might give you a rough idea that it's either somewhat me or someone who knows me, maybe, at least in my local area. But let's say it's a site that gets a little less traffic, if it's someone's personal blog, that'll give you a fair amount of information. You already know the person's a Google user. I suppose if you knew the right people, you could ask Google who logged in from this IP address, the random is behind that, it's going to be one big IP address. At a certain time, that would definitely lower the anonymity set. You know I'm a Gmail user, there's various other things I could have up there. Not to mention you have tabs that automatically open up to services that are not encrypted whatsoever. You can possibly extract usernames. For instance, let's say I had a form system come up automatically in one of my tabs. Well, if you scrape the content that I requested, and it was delivered to me, you can probably pull out my username for that form system. A little bit of Googling later, you have the identity of the person. Or if not the absolute identity, some clues to point you in the right general direction. See, just to have the name of a site can give you a ton of information about the person, what they're interested in, where they're going to visit. And if you already know some of the likely suspects, this might help narrow it down. Plain text login information. Obviously, if the person automatically logs in as soon as they open the tab, that's done in plain text like the bar form systems do. You instantly know the person's username and password. And a lot of people that use the same username on multiple systems, and then a little Google stalking later, you can figure out who they are. On a related subject to that, at one time I was like the #1 Google hit for how to cyber stalk. I wonder exactly how do you put that in your resume. Actually, that was one on cyber stalking, an article on cyber stalking potential employers. So not quite as diabolical as it sounds. Once again, like I mentioned, various plain text that might be passed along on the web page. Like if you're visiting Facebook and they extract all sorts of information about who you are and who your friends are. Even if SSL is used, DNS queries can give a fair amount of information. First of all, if SSL is used, you've still got a connection to that box. That'll tell you who you're communicating with. But let's say that they're even using some kind of proxy that doesn't necessarily forward the DNS request through the proxy. DNS leaks, as it's known in the Tor community. Just having that can give a fair amount of information about who the person is. And of course, headers give you a ton of information like browser type, version, what plugins the person is running, all this kind of details. That gets a lot more interesting when you start talking about not being on the same local area network as the attacker, and let's say they're attacking your website instead, and you don't have any information on the local LAN side of the data. All right, mitigation for this. Obviously, having a dedicated browser for certain activities would go a long way, so you don't automatically pass certain credentials. Like, I'm always worried when I open up even though I'm not logging into a site, if I go to a coffee shop and I log, and I bring up a machine, and I have all my tabs automatically open, and I had chose to store cookies, it's passing those cookies across the network. And if it's not using any kind of SSL, or even if it's using SSL in certain weak implementations, someone can extract that out. So having it do anything I don't want it to do automatically can be a very bad call, especially when you're at DEF CON. I was like, okay, did I remove all my tabs? Did I clean all my data and make sure no cookies are going to be passed on this network? Limiting plugins can help somewhat to lessen your how specific they can get about who you are, at least as far as your user agent string is concerned. Also, there's various ways with JavaScript to pull stuff out of the browser to figure out what plugins someone has installed. You can keep changing your user agent, but really, I think the best thing to do is just keep it fairly generic. I know on the I2P .NET, they just have a common one that the I2P software automatically sets everybody's to be. So you're anonymous by the virtue of everybody being the same. Also, of course, don't have the browser do anything automatically for you. Open tabs, passwords, forms, any of that kind of stuff. Because you just don't want any data being passed in the network that you don't intend to be passed out there. That goes back to that whole, the quieter you are, the more you can hear. Another common way that people leak data out is network scans that automatically use the credentials of whoever's logged into the box. Who has ever seen the tool NetScan? Okay. How about MBT scan? Very similar tools in that particular spec. I like NetScan solely from the standpoint of you can scan a whole bunch of IPs really, really quickly, and it quickly tells you whether or not you have read-write rights to any kind of SMB file shares on that box. It's awesome, or so Bob tells me, to go to a coffee shop and do a scan like this and see what kind of stuff's open. For instance, on this particular scan, you'll notice there's a machine called Ava, and it has 2 folders that we have only read access to, movies and MP3s. 3 that are locked down to the admin, various admin shares, and one that we have read and write rights to called English. But yeah, NetScan is a really cool tool, but if not used properly, it leaves information all over the logs. Now, first of all, everything has to be turned off, and in most cases, a lot of people leave this stuff off and they really shouldn't necessarily. In this case, I've gone to this particular machine, turned on auditing for both success and failure. You can do this underneath the local security policy manager or via GPO remotely. Also, it matters how the person's logging into the box. If you're in a domain, you're going to have Classic switched on automatically. The other option is guest only, and which one of those it is will depend on what gets thrown into the logs. The whole guest only thing kind of annoys me, and the way that Windows 7 automatically starts to share things depending on where you say you are. I hate the idea of anything automatic because it makes it a little bit more confusing on what exactly you configured something to do. But how does it set the log? How does it set the login also makes a difference. If you don't have it on Classic, it's going to try guest login only, so you won't be prompted for a username and password. But here's a few examples of what things might look like in the logs. The 2 items in the back are Windows XP. The one on the left is where basically I had guest only access turned on, and even though I was using the Adrian account, it logged guest as my username. If I hadn't covered up the other screenshot on the far right, it would say Adrian because I turned on classic mode, and that one in the very front, That's the Windows 7 log of the same basic kind of event. Notice event IDs and all that's changed, just like Carlos was mentioning earlier. And you see the logger named Adrian. Well, if you find someone who tried to log into your machine remotely, and they was doing the scanning entire network, and you looked in your logs and you saw it was Adrian, and you happen to know I frequent your coffee shop, how long would it take you to figure out who it is that's actually doing this network scanning? Probably not a whole lot of time. Alright, mitigation for this. Obviously, first off, use a different account. You can also choose just to use a non-specific username. Administrator might possibly work. If the tool has an option to use other credentials, try it out. I tried this once with Network Monitor, and because it has this option, and as I recall, it still passed my credentials. So it's like the old Ronald Reagan saying, I'm pretty sure someone said it for him also, but trust but verify. You can try that out, but put a sticker on it, actually run it against one of your machines and look at the logs and see what it actually plugs in there. And of course, shift, right click, run as. If you really got to do most of your work in one account, you can just do a quick, hold down shift, right click, run as, and run it as some other account. Related ideas, when sometimes auditing can cause problems. Sometimes actually auditing, depending on how it's done, can actually cause security problems. Who here has ever accidentally fat-fingered the login and typed in the password on the username field? I know there's more people out there that's done than that, yeah. Well, Linux does this more or less correctly because it doesn't automatically put in the name of the failed login. Windows does put in the name of the failed login. So let's say my password is I love sea monkeys. Well, I typed that in accidentally in my username, and all of a sudden there's a password. My password is actually in the logs in plain text for anybody with administrative privileges, or anybody that wants to take a boot CD of that machine, boot it up and copy the event lock off, or anybody like Carlos could just attack me with a interpreter and then just start plugging out those digital credentials. So let's say that this could be a problem. So let's say Carlos pops a box. He can go searching through the entire log and go, okay, I'm looking for all failed logins. Okay, I'm pretty sure the usernames do not match the pattern S3AM0NK3Y. So I'm guessing that's a password. What's the very next successful login right after that? Probably the username. And a while back, I actually wrote a script to do this. I call it the PEVCAC attack. Problem exists between chair and keyboard. Keyboard and chair in this case. And I have the code out there for basically a little script that automatically looks at this. Unfortunately, I haven't updated it since Windows XP days, so it doesn't work in Vista 07, but it should be a fairly easy task to update it to make it work in newer versions. Alright, another thing that leaks out information about someone is SID probes. And if anybody does a lot of wireless networking nowadays, I might want some more details from you on this, because it used to be back in the day, depending on what OS you were running, if, let's say you're attached to a certain network, your machine at some other point later in time, if it wasn't attached to a network, may sit out there and probe for a network it's attached to previously. So let's say you're no longer at home, you're no longer at the coffee shop, you're at work, it might probe out there, hey, is this particular SID at Adrian's house? Is it out there? No. Coffee shop, I like coffee beans. Is it out there? No, it's not. And then finally it may try my business work and actually connect. Well, all these different probes are easily to snip off the out of the air if you're using a network card in monitor mode. Kismet automatically puts this stuff out underneath the probe category. Now, I remember back in the day, I want to say it was XP, early service packs, it would automatically do this sort of probing. I'm not sure it does that as much on newer versions of Windows. Does anybody know which ones automatically probe now, which ones don't? Alright, ones that do automatically probe though, and, well, for instance, ad hoc, that's automatically going to probe. And if you start seeing probes coming across that say HP something, 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 you might have a rough idea that the guy has this particular HP printer at his house. Have you seen those kind of probes come across? Other types of ad hoc networks, you might see that, what was it? Free public Wi-Fi. Oh, that's spread all over the freaking world. Just various things like that can leak out information. Also, one of those asinine things I always hear people talk about, like I said, this depends greatly on OS detection. I've already covered most of what I was wanting to say here. network names, of course, may be significant. By knowing the network name it's probing for, you get an idea of what the person's into, like what their favorite comic book character is, if they happen to name the home access point Wolverine, or what coffee shops they go to, because those things will pop up, what school they go to, those SIDs might pop up in the probes of the networks they're looking for. Geolocation, by the way, you know what SID someone's attaching to? Have you ever gone out to a Wiggle? Wiggle's basically the largest independent database of wireless access points I know of. Go out there and put in a SID. If it's unique enough, you can look up someone's MAC address. Well, you're going to have a MAC address regardless. I mean, look up the SID, you'll get a geographical location for it. You can then plug that into Google Earth and find out where that particular access point is. Assuming it's not something super common like Linksys. Who all here watches Hack 5? Pretty good video podcast. Darren Kitchen was in the hospital once, and I was kind of curious what hospital he was in. And he was like doing a show from the hospital, and I saw the network SID on like one of his screenshots. And so I looked up what hospital he was in using this technique. By the way, yes, the slides I've been showing, if you look at my SID, you'll be able to figure out where I live too. But it's no human secret. And I will. Anyway. Common mitigation things you can do, use a common SID. You can be a screw of attackers. Keep your SID to be Linksys. Just to see if it, this guy got hit with Linksys, it must be wide open. See if they screw around with you. But actually do lock it down. Clean out unused wireless networks, that way you know for sure you're not going to do, they're not going to get probed for. Disable auto connects. There's various options you can set. Like I said, newer OSs I was playing around with this in, they don't seem to send these probes automatically. But if you have broadcasting turned off, pretty much the person's got to automatically probe to be able to find it. A lot of people as a security measure recommend turning off SID broadcasting. This is such an asinine, stupid, inbred idea from a security standpoint. For multiple reasons. First of all, I've seen clients that just totally screw up if you're not broadcasting your SID. That's first of all. Second of all, it's going to control confuse the hell out of users, so there's usability issues there. Third, it doesn't make a freaking difference. If you have any association traffic, anybody who knows what they're doing is going to have a card in monitor mode and plug the SID out anyway. So it's no real security feature. But this also means that machines that have attached to it before will have to be configured to automatically connect even if it's not broadcasting. And this means any place they do go, even on a newer operating system, it's going to be going out there probing saying, hey, I'm a machine before I connected to this SID. This gives you information about me. How are you doing? But you still see people recommend this. I actually was at a place where the tech in charge, or this person who was helping out his friend who owned the business, was recommending stuff like, oh, yeah, WPA slows things down too much. Just use MAC address filtering. And Bob, my friend Bob tells me the same guy looks like he configured something that says hide servers. And his version of hide servers was basically just to turn off broadcasting of hey, I'm out here messages from NetBIOS. If you scan the IP address, you're still going to find it. Kind of, scary. By the way, here's that particular config that I was mentioning. If you go into your wireless, configure wireless connection stuff in Windows 7. By the way, anybody else found in Windows 7, it's a good thing they improved the search functionality. Well, actually started with Windows Vista because they moved the control panels to such screwed up 2 billion clicks places to get to them that the only way you can possibly find those control panels is to use search. Alright. Another way that data gets leaked out about a machine, about who's doing what on a network, is via either the host name or NetBIOS name broadcasts. In the Windows world, it's more or less, this is not 100% accurate, more or less equates the same thing. But based on these names, what can you tell about the people connecting to this network? Well, we know one person is probably into the TV show Bobby's World. His name might actually be Bobby, and he's just trying to be ironic. There's a machine called Glenn Lappy. We'll take a wild guess that's a laptop, and probably the guy who owns this Glenn. Glenn happens to be my roommate, so that is the case. PC, that's someone who likes to be very nondescript, so that's one thing. IG test 20GB. What does that say about that particular box? Just from the host name, what does that tell you about that box? Was that 20 gigabyte? The IG on the front is
Iron Geek?
Iron Geek. And what do you? If I have a box named Test, what are some other assumptions you might make as a pen tester about that box? Not locked down, possibly not hardened. So I've made a good likely target just right there.
Might have client data on it.
Might have client data on it. Might have versions of an application that haven't been hardened. Like, for instance, you're doing web application development. It's fine to leak all sorts of error messages out to the end user while you're writing it in the test environment, because that's useful for debugging. Now, when you actually put that in production, you should take that crap out. But the test one may not have that type of stuff crap taken out. So when you throw your SQL attacks against that, you don't just get back an error message that says nothing. You might get back an error message with a precise SQL string, which really helps out a whole lot. A few more details. Now, in this particular case, this is the one previously was basically given to the router because of a DHCP request that requested a particular host name. NetBIOS also broadcasts this out here. Like, for instance, we have a machine right here, and I don't know if you can read that from back there, but it was sending out messages saying, hey, I'm out here, how y'all doing? Hey, I'm out here, how y'all doing? And this is the machine name, Skynet. Now, if you saw a machine named Skynet, what can you assume about the owner?
They like Terminator.
Right. If you're going to try a few passwords or start constructing a password dictionary to attack this machine, what are you going to do?
Terminator.
Some of them. Anyway, DHCP can also have the host option, and that's basically what you saw on that first screen of a picture of my router's entry page. NetBIOS main traffic is saying, hey, I'm out here. It's another example. Direct probes may sometimes return what the machine's name is. Mitigation, you can choose a less specific name or a default manufacturer's name if known. If you don't want to confuse someone, you have a Dell laptop, find out what HP is, calling their machines. What is it? Like oil? I think Toshiba puts like Toshiba-owner as like a default machine name or something along those lines. Disable NetBIOS. I'm not sure how well this is going to look as far as naming. I'm not sure how reliable things are necessarily going to be. Around my house, I usually just access everything directly by IP address. But keep in mind, NetBIOS and SMB are not synonymous. It's not exactly the same thing here now. Let's see. Oh, for DHCP, if you want to keep your box and requesting and giving its hosting out to the DHCP server and logging that there, you can go in there and edit your dhclient.conf. As best I can tell, and if my testing and backtrack, this is the case, if you just go ahead and comment out this particular line, you're good to go. In Windows, I need to do some more testing. I found out various parameters you can set about DHCP service running on Windows, but none of them quite matches that particular attribute when you make a DHCP request. So I haven't quite figured that out. And by the way, if you go in and, I'm not going to pick on the backtrack for developers because I love them dearly. But if you go into your DHCP logs and you see a bunch of boxes request BT as the host name, go look at those freaking IPs. Just saying. And if you see this guy on your network and you see that in your logs, just you know who to beat down.
I'll be waiting.
Alright, advanced IP settings. Let me see. Oh, you can disable NetBIOS over TCP IP underneath your adaptive settings. Alright, also, another topic, DHCP release menu, and I need more information on this. I've noticed on some boxes, like one of my Linux boxes, whenever I bring the adapter back up, it would try to reconnect to the same network it was on before. Well, this might give you a fair amount of information. For instance, let's say they connected at a card shop. That's fine if you give you a whole lot of information. You've got probably on that box, it's probably going to be a 192.168 number. Might give you a lot of information. But let's say they went from the university, which might have an IP that's unique for every single person who actually uses it, a public internet-facing IP address, and then they come to the business to do some kind of attack, and the first IP address they requested was something that was from a university. That greatly reduces the anonymity set and gives you an idea of who to look at. So Those requests for previously used DHCP addresses, the DHCP automatic, let me see how I'm going to phrase this right. Those automatic renew requests that's sometimes sent out could reveal information about a person. Like I said, not a whole lot, not a real big deal if it's for non-routables. Or if you want to map an IP address to who owns it, I like a lot of the tools at servicesniff.net. Also, of course, the IP they requested, plus the network owner who owns that IP address, plus the hosting that was stored, plus a little Googling, can pretty quickly lead to an identity. Like, let's say you know a person goes to a certain university, and you know they really like H.P. Lovecraft because the machine was named Cthulhu. It doesn't take too long to look through the student web pages to figure out which particular student it might be. Alright, mitigation. This is going to need a whole lot more research because I'm trying to figure out which OSs request in which ways. As Carl was mentioning about the Windows world, different clients do things in different odd ways, and I don't really have a good comprehensive list for when they try to request the same IP address again via DHCP and when they don't. So I need to compile that. Did you know the Microsoft DHCP team actually has their own blog? I didn't know that until I started looking into this. So I may have to check in for some more details. One way you might be able to do this, in Linux you can pretty much guarantee you can do this, is if you go into varlib dhcp3, you can go ahead and delete all the .thesis files, and that probably largely take care of it. I haven't tested this in Windows because I haven't been brave enough yet, but if you start deleting the registry keys at that particular location, look in there first to know which ones you're deleting. But inside of that general path seems to be where the least information is stored, so that might be something to look into. Oh, and thanks to Eric Coleman from Satori Project. Who has ever heard of Satori? Satori is essentially a passive OS fingerprinting tool that sits there and listens for certain types of DHCP requests. Because different OSs do a DHCP request slightly different. So based on those requests, you can tell whether it's a Linux box or a Windows box or possibly which version of Windows and whatnot. Satori has some extra features as well, but I just use Network Miner. Network Miner uses the Satori fingerprints, as well as the fingerprints from like POF and EtherCAT and whatnot. And that was the reason I was asking anybody who wants to connect to NetCoff, because I was going to go ahead and see if I can identify what OS you were running just from doing passive scans, well, passive sniffing. Oh, here's that particular key I was talking about that seems to store my lease information. Which brings up another subject. This lease information, if you happen to be doing forensics and you want to know what else the networks and machines been on, you can start go looking in these and look at all the IP addresses the person's had recently. That gives you a good idea of where all they've been. Alright, various other apps that may leak data out there. I was thinking maybe Skype, some kind of IM client, IRC, so I decided to do a quick test. I fired up Wireshark. Sorry, Ken. I like the pretty GUI. It makes me feel all safe and warm and fuzzy inside. Anyway, I fired it up and fired up Pigeon, because I use Pigeon for most all my IM needs. And I decided to see what else information was going out about me. Well, one thing you'll notice real quick is I was connecting to IRC. You actually can see that in that particular line. And we'll drill down to something a little bit more interesting in Wireshark here in a second. Even DNS information shows something about who I'm contacting and what services I'm using. Like if I'm contacting something that says, I don't even know what AOL calls those servers, but if I was contacting aim.aol.com, you have a good idea that I'm an AIM user. If the protocol is unencrypted, there's tons of information, as you'll see here in a second, that will go out. And you don't know what all applications might be running in your box that are doing some kind of phone home activity until you actually put a sniffer on and figure it out. Sometimes putting a sniffer on something, first of all, it's a great way to learn about networking in general. Second of all, it's a great way to figure out, what's that?
It said Windows does it. Windows 7.
Home? Yeah. You know what all information goes out in those packets?
No, I think it just has to do with Windows genuine validation.
That's the claim.
I'm sure there's more information than we want going on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if someone can figure out how, if it's not encrypted, and someone can figure out how it's obfuscated. That could be really useful for this kind of work as well. But unencrypted, you get tons of information sent out. For instance, here I found a particular packet and say, oh, this is from IRC. Well, let me do a right click in Wireshark and do a follow stream. And everybody here has played with Wireshark some, right? Just a little bit? fun tool. Here, everything in blue is basically stuff that
You would see.
that I received. Anything in pink is stuff that I sent. Why it associates me with pink, I don't know. We're not going to go into the details of that. If I scroll up here, you'd actually see my password I use. But here you see that I was connecting to freenode.net, the series of IRC servers, and my username was IronGeek. You find my password up above. Also, because of the way this particular IRC client works, it automatically tries to use your login ID as your ident. So even though I used the Halo IronGeek as my nick on IRC, it automatically sent out my name, Adrian, because that happened to be the username of the machine I was logged into under. So that was going to be the username I was logged into on that machine. But tons of information about me just sniffing that particular connection.
Your domain Skynet?
Yes, actually.
That was on there too.
Yeah, there's another example. And so what do you know about me based on Skynet?
You like summer game. You like summer game.
Actually, no, I just want a machine for president.
Yeah.
That's all. Awareness, obviously, knowing what's actually being sent out there, what applications you're running, that all helps. Don't use those apps if you want to stay low profile, but first you got to know what those apps are leaking. This goes back to why that whole clean room box is just so much of a better idea. Sniff to see what's happening. Actually, I generally recommend just occasionally sniffing your boxes. That didn't sound right at all. Sniffing the boxes occasionally just to see what's going on. Like one time I had a box that got compromised. And anybody who says they've never had one of the boxes hacked, either you're very, very good or you're very, very bad and you just don't know that you got hacked. Or you just haven't been doing it very long. But one box I was sitting there sniffing, and I don't remember the name of the particular backdoor they put on it, but I noticed lead speak leaving my machine. And I hate lead speak. I mean, I really, really hate lead speak. Not quite as bad as I hate texting speak, but still. So once I saw that leaving my box, I instantly knew something was up. So I highly recommend sniffing. Now, a related thing I'd like to look into is VPN follow homes. I think this might be an interesting thing to pull off and correlate data on at a larger hackathon like DEF CON. Who here is using a VPN right now? You are. Anybody else? Anybody who here ever used a VPN while at a hackathon or a security conference? I don't believe you all.
I did.
Okay. Let's say someone did something like this. This might be kind of interesting to do. VPN follow home. What you do is basically you find out the name of the person's machine. Like there's a machine called Adrian-PC. Wild guess, it might be me. Or if it was Adrian Crenshaw, you definitely know it's me. You follow traffic from there, even though it's encrypted, it's contacting a certain IP out on the internet. Based on who owns that IP address, you may have found my home VPN service I'm going into, so you know my home IP address then, or maybe at least the company I'm working for. All of this can be useful information. So I think it might be kind of cool just to come up with a tool that somewhat automates the whole, VPN follow home idea. Go to a hackathon, see what machine names come up, and see who you can trace back to where they actually work via what VPN they connect to. I thought that'd be nifty. That might be a future project for me to fire up in Python, because I'm learning Python now, and do that, and use some of the libpcap libraries and see what I can pull up. Oh, another thing I need to do some more look into is universal plug and play and Bonjour. Basically things that automatically help configure your network and peripherals. Anything that's automatic, I have kind of a little bit of a distrust for. See what all information is given out about that by those particular things. Phone home addresses, various things your machine might automatically contact. For instance, let's say before you put your machine to sleep, you had a bunch of file shares open. You bring the machine back out of sleep on an entirely different network with all stuff it requests. That might be informative. And so much more. Like I said, this subject matter is wide open for finding out more things. This is by no means a comprehensive talk, and this is something I kind of came up with because I was also working on the NetCoff game we'll be running tomorrow, me and Martin. Hopefully some of y'all will come out and play that. But this whole subject matter I think needs a lot more research. I got to thank Dancing Dan, Bill Swearingen, Jim Halfpenny, and Michael Dickey from Paul.com mailing list for giving me a few suggestions on things I should add to this presentation. A little bit about that clean room PC idea. Simply stated, an attacker should use the same box that they use for like normal day-to-day activities for the attack. That way there's less personal data that could possibly be leaked. Harden the box as best as possible, using some of the tips that have been given, though this, like I said, this presentation can in no way be comprehensive. Clean room PC is probably going to be better than a clean room boot partition, and both of those will still be better than like a clean room VM. But still, all of those would be better probably than doing the testing from your normal default profile that you do your average web surfing and day-to-day activities on. And so make yourself a dual boot system. A few great tools to play around with. Wireshark, if you want to see what tools are actually doing, use Wireshark. Or if you want to, TCP dump's cool too. Actually, I really like TCP dump from the standpoint of dumping tons and tons of data to a PCAP file, and then importing it into something else. It's one of my favorite things to do with it. Network Miner is an awesome tool, which I'll show here in a second, for doing passive OS fingerprinting. And I hope some more people have connected to Netcoff and sent the load data out there. Backtrack Linux, of course. Backtrack Linux. Pretty much any security tool you want to use, or at least a large majority of them, if they can figure out how to get them to work, it's pretty much on there. And a few events I wanted to tell people about. DerbyCon 2011, which is coming up in a little less than a year. It's organized by Dave, Martin, and myself. Hopefully that comes up real well. Louisville InfoSec happens every year, usually in October. And various cons I highly recommend going to. SkyDogCon, even though it hasn't happened yet. HackerCon, since I'm here right now, come next year. Freaknik, because I go there every year. Nauticon, and of course AutoZone down in Atlanta. Don't know how far a trip it is for some of you, but I always have a good time at AutoZone. Alright, finally, any questions?
Not really a question, but I linked to some stuff off your website that was showing, like, in Windows 7, there's XML files being stored anytime you connect to a Wi-Fi spot, and it actually stores the key in that. There's some way to crack it or something.
If you use a wireless key view from Nearsoft, you have local machine access, you can plug that off.
Yeah. So that stuff was pretty cool. Nearsoft has like a ton of cool.
Yeah, Near has a ton of interesting little tools. And I'm going to bring up Network Miner again. I love Network Miner for the information it'll give you. No one's actually sent me enough data to really have this be interesting. But, apparently they have. Alright, here's a ton of information. Passively is actually did a little bit of OS fingerprinting on a few of these boxes. This is a Solaris box. I'm having doubts with that. But notice how the host name is BT. Probably a backtrack box.
Yep. That's why it comes up wrong.
Was that? I really don't know. Well, let's take a look.
What's the IP address?
10.0.0.110.
That's my VM.
Oh, it's your VM? I wonder why it says Solaris. That's odd. Did you modify anything about the way your IP stack works?
No.
Anyway, both EtherCap, see, basically, Network Miner combines a bunch of different tools. I can't remember how to pronounce Eddie's last name, but he developed this tool, and go out there and play with it. But it includes the passive OS fingerprinting tools from a bunch of other tools, like EtherCap, Hobbs, and Satori. Based on Satori, it thinks it's Linux because it sees this particular bit of information, and there's something called a vendor ID that gets passed in some DHCP requests, and you'll quickly know what OS it is based on that. But this is what Miles are going to figure out for this particular machine just by passively listening. So actually, one of the ways if you want to figure out do an OS fingerprint of like a web server without scanning with something like Nmap, just visit it a few times by running Network Miner or POF or one of these other tools and passively fingerprint it. Not that most people don't change their header, so you can probably just look at the header and know. Let's go look at this box. This is one Windows box. See what information we have on that. Why does it think it's this particular type of OS? Let's go take a look. EtherCap profiled it as a Windows 2000 box. That's probably because EtherCap hasn't been updated in quite a while, so thus its fingerprints haven't been updated. Satori thinks it's a DHCP, via DHCP request, that it's a Windows XP box. See, there's a string, I think it's something like MSFT 5.0 that gets passed as the vendor ID. And by the way, if anybody can figure out a way to change that in Windows, let me know. I asked that question on like Aardvark, just to test out Aardvark, and I had a lot of people answer the question, but they didn't know what I was asking, so it didn't get me anywhere. But if anybody can figure out how to change that window ID for DSU requests in Windows, let me know. And various other boxes, like here's one that actually did identify as a Linux box. And
Hey, I'm just interested. I connected with my phone. I'm just interested if it says what it says.
okay, I may have to need your IP address just in case it doesn't always fingerprint it properly. Oh, the BlackBerry?
Oh, there it is.
Who's the BlackBerry? BT Solaris, BT Other. There's two people using Backtrack, it looks like. Some Android phone.
That's it.
It plugged out the name, so it's known as an Android user.
What else did it show?
Sam's iPhone.
So it doesn't give you any more information?
Not a whole lot. It may not be any of its fingerprint databases, and you may need to send more traffic. It may take a little bit of traffic before I can identify it. Host details. Oh, what's in here? The vendor code it sent out was DHCP-CD 4.0.15. But the nice thing about Network Miner also, I'm going to close Network Miner down, is it automatically dumps a PCAP file for you. Let me see if I can go find this. While it's doing all its capturing, got a little PCAP file right here, and I can then analyze it for more details inside of Wireshark, or I can load it from Decane to extract passwords. Although Network Miner does extract some passwords, another cool thing about Network Miner I love is it can watch FTP, HTTP streams, and SMB streams, and pluck files out of them. So if I'm running this in the gateway, or if I'm doing a man-in-the-middle attack and sniffing the connection, if you're using any of those three protocols, I can start dumping files from my hard drive and start looking at them. Images, Word docs, all sorts of stuff like that. So it's really nifty for that. But yeah, there's this. Here's just some of the data in that PCAP file that Network Miner generated for me. So now I can just load it in some other tool if I want to find out other information. That's pretty much all I have for my presentation. Is there no other questions? All right then. Thanks very much for your time.
Is your PowerPoint available for download?
Not yet, but it will be shortly. Sometime early next week when I put out all the other videos from this conference, it'll be out there.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
That script's in your email box.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to playing with that.
It's a bash script written by Shep.
The script, as far as I'm concerned, there's no real copyright on it.
No, you can get it off the web.
All right.
The web link is
About close as I can get.
squatthis.net
Squatthis.net/papers.
And then where is ap.sh?
Where is ap.sh?
Yeah.
Neat. I'll try that out. Thank you very much.
Bash script, shadow page you wrote.
Oh.
What you do is you run the script with the MAC address, and if it returns geo coordinates, you take the longitude, latitude, cut and paste those into Google Maps, and it will show you.
Nifty.
What comes after where is?
Where is AP? Access point.
Cool. Well, I thank you all for your time, and I want to let the next speaker get themselves up here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this stuff first.